Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for agreeing to be part of the Nayanta Conversation series.
Well, thank you. I mean, I enjoyed my last interactions. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You were born before India became independent and grew up in the initial years of independence. So, what was it like growing up in the immediate aftermath of freedom, and what were the formative influences growing up in school, in family, in your neighborhoods?
That's always a tough kind of question to answer. I think I've tried to summarize it in my book. For us, it was actually, we were literally the first generation sort of in the post-independence period, and it was quite positive. I mean, we were not at all aware that the country is going through difficult times. You're going to meet Soumya Swaminathan later on.
Yes.
And she will tell you how through the 50s, the country was, food deficient, we were dependent on American wheat, we had shortages, but we were completely not aware of this. We felt that, look, we've arrived, and when you're young, I mean, you want to be positive. So I recall a film, I forget who directed it, but it's the one which had a bunch of school children taken around India. So with the song, Aao Bachcho Tumhe Dikhaye Jhanki Hindustan Ki. We loved it, it was a great sort of sense. Okay, we become independent, now good things are going to happen. So it was a good feeling.
And your own family and parents, what kind of influence did they have on the kind of choices that you made later on in terms of education and career?
Well, actually, they were, and I come from what I would, that time would be called a lower middle class. So my father started as a clerk in the Indian Defense Accounts Department, right? I mean, in those days, it was a government job, so it was a good job.
Yeah.
But, it was a non-elite kind of job. And I think parents, like most parents of that group, basically conveyed to their children that, look, we can't be giving you anything other than a good education, and we'll give you the best education we can, and the rest is really up to you. And I think at the back of your mind, you also had the feeling that what happens to them is to some extent dependent on whether you do well or not, because they really typically did not conduct themselves in a manner to have a big cushion themselves. And my father, he was very sort of left things to me and as things would go on. But he was very aware that education mattered. And I've mentioned this in my book that, towards the end of when he was approaching retirement, he had become a grade 1 officer, that kind of thing. And so the people from the ranks who do very well, they usually offered the promotion into the IDAS. That was the sort of
Indian Defense Accounts.
Class 1 service, okay? And what his bosses said is, look, your record's very good and we like your work and all the rest of it. So we're quite happy to recommend you for promotion. But if you do that, then you will become head of an office, but you will become head of a small office. Whereas at the moment, he was sort of somewhere in the middle of a rather larger office. It's okay when you just join, but he would be in the first batch of the IDAS running small offices. So they said, look, you can either do that or we post you to Delhi. So you'll be near your family and you'll have time to, get yourself a house and so on. And my father decided to forego the promotion, go to Delhi, but his main reasoning was, I'll go to a better school. Because his judgment was that if I move out of Secunderabad, where we were, which had quite a few decent schools, and get to an even smaller place, my education would really get ruined. Whereas moving to Delhi, it would be improved. And that's what happened. And I look back on it, I don't think I've ever made a comparable sacrifice for my kids to the one that my father did,
Yeah.
So that's the image of those kind of people.
So you went to school across different cities in India, is it?
No, Secunderabad and then Delhi.
Secunderabad and Delhi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we were posted there. I mean,
the cantonment
I was there in some very junior class in Ambala, but my father was posted to Secunderabad at the time of what we call the police action, right?
1948.
And no, not 40. It was later than that, I think. 50 something, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but something like that. And stayed there till 57.
Okay.
Came to Delhi in 57. So we were there 7 years actually.
Yeah. So, what kind of a student were you in school?
Good student actually. I mean, throughout a good student.
Okay, and what did you want to do when you graduated from school? You were interested in
that
sciences,
generation of people were just trained to go into the government. So everybody said, we will sit for the. If you're a hearty type and so on, go to the army. If you were a little bit less hearty type, sit for the IAS or the central services. And that was my objective, really, until much, much later.
Yeah. And so you went to St. Stephen's, right?
Yes,
and after
in
that
Delhi,
to Oxford.
in Delhi.
So how did that happen, that you decided to do economics in St. Stephen's and then go to
Well,
Oxford?
because I wanted to do something, and I didn't think that science was my subject, really. And I didn't think I wanted to do just a standard arts degree. So economics seemed to be something a little bit in between, a little more formal, a little more rational, and so I chose economics. I enjoyed it actually, it's quite fun.
And then how did you decide to go to Oxford?
I didn't decide to go to Oxford. There was a scholarship, the Rhodes scholarship.
Okay, you got the
And
Rhodes
I
scholarship.
applied for it, not thinking that I would get it. And obviously, when I got it, I was delighted, and then went off to Oxford.
And who were your main influences at Oxford in terms of economists and teachers?
When you turn up in a place like Oxford, I mean, there are quite a lot of well-known teachers around. And I mean, you had complete freedom in the sense you could attend their lectures or not attend their lectures. And as long as you worked independently, it didn't matter which lecture you attended. So I actually attended a variety of lectures. I wouldn't say that any of the well-known lecturers was particularly good. I mean, they gave these lectures, but you went there and you felt it's good to have attended a lecture by Sir Roy Harrod and Sir John Hicks. But I wouldn't say that listening to those lectures was anything better than actually reading their books. So,
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we had much more flexibility and freedom. And I think for the first time, unlike in Delhi University, where there was an attitude that, the teacher is transmitting knowledge. Whereas I think in Oxford, the attitude was, it doesn't matter, I mean, who knows what's the right answer? But are you addressing it sensibly? So that's, I mean, it's best characterized in my view by a story that was very popular in Oxford at the time, that during the examinations, one of the students got up and asked for the invigilator's attention and said, I think there's been some mistake because this is the same question paper as last year. So the examiner said, my dear boy, the questions are always the same. It's the answers that change. I thought it was really, really good. I tell you, in this day and age, I sometimes give lectures at schools, and I tell teachers that since all the kids are getting the answers from ChatGPT, why don't you pose a question of the following kind, that this is ChatGPT's answer to the following question. Please critique it. At least then you'll get some intelligent application of mind, Otherwise the guys are just producing whatever the thing ChatGPT says.
That's a very good idea. We should try it in Nayanta, actually. Thank you. And at Oxford, I think you were also with the Oxford Union.
Yeah.
Yes, you were president of the union.
Yep.
Wow.
I enjoyed, that was another very big difference between Oxford and Delhi. Because I used to do a lot of debating in Delhi and so on. Many students do that. But I don't think in Delhi anybody debated. They just elocuted. Because you would go there
Give your
and there'd be three guys who are judging. you are not trying to persuade the audience. You're trying to make sure that this fellow gives you high score. That's not what a debate is about. I mean, a debate is about addressing the entire House and letting the House vote for the motion. And, you know, depending on whether you carried the motion or didn't carry the motion, it's you and your team did well. We never had that. It was just individual performances. So somebody who remembered his speech well, spoke well, that's all elocution. It's not really debating at all.
Do you remember any of the topics for which you spoke for or against
Usually
the motion?
useless topics. I
Useless
must
topics.
confess that, you know, I think my criticism of Delhi University and the economics we were taught, that was actually a very interesting time when India's approach to policy was being gelled and formulated. They told us nothing about what was currently important. I mean, you know, I graduated BA in whatever, 63. Now, at that time, the whole issue of whether planning is a sensible thing or not, are we controlling the economy too much or not, should the government be controlling, should it be pro-public sector or private sector, these are were live issues.
Yeah.
But no, we were just, I mean, the best example in Delhi University of a lecture, he would say, well, you know, this is the third 5-year plan. It's for 5 years and it's the third one we've got. Now, you know, completely empty. I mean, honestly, the theoretical lectures were a little bit better. But, you know, what did they add to what the textbook said? Nothing. I mean, if you were willing to go and read the textbook, and yet they could have made it very, very interesting because these issues were live at the time. I mean, you know, look, we were not even told that when the second plan, which was the plan which formulated India's policy, all this Mahalanobis model and all that nonsense, we were not even told that there was a group of economists. I mean, in those days, Panditji used to do this consultation, okay? So a bunch of economists was called to critique the plan. Of course, dutifully, they all approved it. But there were important dissenting notes to the plan. I mean, I forget one or two of the Bombay-based guys that said, you know, this is all wrong.
Brahmananda.
No, not Brahmananda.
Before that.
I'm trying to think.
Before that, okay.
Anyway, it'll come back. But he had said that, look, I don't agree with this. Now, you would think that if one of the distinguished economists had said this is a bad idea, in the university, you should be told, do you agree with them? And maybe all of us would have said, well, but you know, it's only in student activities that these questions would come up. I remember we had a Saturday night kind of, or Wednesday night something, discussion club where we would invite well-known people to come and speak. In those things, the students would ask questions and, you know, you'd get some response. But actually, I would say in the actual discussions, the approach was there is a right answer. And, you know, if you follow my notes carefully, you will do well. Whether you apply your mind or not is irrelevant. I mean, you know. So I think that's, and I think that still remains true. Because, you know, we have not, people have talked about it, but we haven't changed our educational system at all.
So when you went to Oxford on the Rhodes Scholarship, were you thinking of getting into policy or in doing a PhD and getting into academics?
No, actually, I was, I mean, all the guys in Oxford also wanted to sit for the IAS exam.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, well, I'll go to Oxford, it'll be nice, and then I'll get into the IAS. But by then I became really interested in economics. And I realized that if you join the IAS, you would be taken into some generalist service and you would not be actually able to say, I want to work as an economist in government. So if you want to do that, you want to learn a bit more economics, come in laterally, as one or two people had done. So I gave up the idea of wanting to join the IAS and went off and joined the World Bank instead. Now, of course, you know, that was a much, much better paid job and more glamorous. So I'm never sure whether I was tempted by that
Yeah.
or not. But it is. I was offered other jobs in the private sector, which I turned down, because I did want to work on economic policy making in India somehow.
And it's well known that you were among the youngest persons to become a division chief in
Oh, yeah,
World
the
Bank
World
when
Bank,
you were
yeah.
only 28.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
did that happen?
No, I think that really happened because actually there's an India story there.
It's an India, okay.
Because that happened mainly because McNamara wanted to emphasize that the World Bank should sort of rejuvenate itself by giving it the mission of reducing poverty. So we were going to create a new division. And you know, in those days, very few of the people wanted to head such a division because they all wanted to do the traditional things, fiscal, yevo and all that. I mean, I was deputy division chief even at that young age in the fiscal division. And they identified Arun Shuri and said, you know, he was a couple of years senior to me and he was very good. And they said, look, we want you to head this division. So he wanted to go back because, you know, he wanted to sort of get into journalism and things like that. So he said, no, I'm not really interested. So one of these chaps said, you know what, the whole issue of poverty is very important. He said, well, what is interesting in that? Just that there are a hell of a lot of people and they're very poor. There's nothing more that's interesting. So because he turned it down, then they came to me and said, why don't you become the division chief? But I enjoyed that. It was a different, it brought in a totally different approach to how you judge progress. It's not just GDP. Is it trickling down or not? And that was, I thought, quite interesting.
And then, so how many years were you at the World Bank before coming back to India?
I was there actually, I joined it in 68 and left in 79, I think. Okay. So I was there for about 11 years. When I went there, I thought I would be there for 3 or 4. But then I met my wife and we got married and then one kid. So the plan to return got a bit postponed. And then she was finishing her PhD. That took a little bit more time and so on. That's what happened.
Okay. And so, how did the transition to the government of India happen? Because you worked in multiple departments, finance,
well, you know,
commerce.
both my wife and I were very keen to come back. As a matter of fact, I would give the credit for coming back to her. Because in all these matters, I mean, you know, the lady of the house, I mean, if she's got doubts, then, you know, the plan will backfire. But she was determined that, you know, we're going to have children. Yeah. We cannot expect them to think of India as their home if we don't bring them up there. So we wanted to come back, okay? Transition, we had different, you know, she was, I mean, she was also offered jobs in government, but she didn't want a job in government. She wanted to run a research institution, not run, work in a research institute. Later on, she became head of that. I wanted to work in government. And frankly, there were the usual resentments of an outsider. Because, you know, I came in at a joint secretary level, but I was much younger than the other joint secretaries. So, but the difference is within 3 years, these guys' tenure was over and they moved off, whereas I stayed there. So the next lot were happy to treat me as a senior person. So if you didn't, I personally think if you didn't push yourself as some kind of an expert and just wanted to be part of the team and contribute as best you could, I thought they were pretty good actually. And particularly the senior people in the IAS in those days, they were very open-minded. And I think they appreciated different points of view. I don't know whether that's changed or not. We have to ask people joining laterally now. But I think in those days it was very supportive.
For those who don't know, his wife is Isha Judge Ahluwalia, again a very well-known, highly reputed economist who headed this institution called ICRIER for many years.
I mean, she passed away in 2020. But I think before that, I mean, she was. She did a lot of work on industrial policy and, you know, policy issues. And then towards the later part of her study period, she worked a lot on urbanization. So looking at states rather than national level. In the discussion, it turned out that if you raise questions, lots of the people realize that, yeah, we're going the wrong way and we should change. And I think that's extremely important. You told me this story about a colleague of yours,
Yes.
which I think I'm going to repeat here,
Please.
because I think he allowed me to, who came in as, he was in the tech side of things under Manmohan Singh.
Yes.
And according to him, Manmohan Singh saw him very early, and he said, you know, I must tell you, if you're going to agree with everything I say, then I don't think I want you here. Now, not enough people say that. And to my mind, it worries me because, you know, through the 1970s, we carried on doing what we were doing in the early 60s, even though the world had changed. Today, the world has dramatically changed. I mean, in geopolitics, in geoeconomics, God knows what, climate change. So, I mean, the first thing that any political leader should be doing is saying, look, the world has changed dramatically. What is the change you're recommending for me? And I don't think it's being put that way. So, I mean, I'm counting on all you guys in industry. You know, I have to say another thing, that I think it was very easy in the 70s, not 70s, the late 70s, because I think industry used to express its view much more freely. And you didn't find it difficult to tell your bosses that, you know, there are these guys, but then there are these guys. I mean, my favorite, of course, was Rahul Bajaj. You know, a very distinguished industrialist, but more than that, a very outstanding and outspoken guy. I mean, in all these damn meetings we all had, trying to attract foreign investment and so on, Rahul would regale the house by saying, well, yes, you know, India has great prospects, but I must tell you that I'm producing a product for which there's a 15-year waiting list, which was true of his scooters in those days. And I'm not allowed to increase production because my capacity has been limited by my license. And you know, nobody could believe that. And when he said it, it was pretty obvious to everyone that this is stupid. You know, I mean, really, the only word can be used, stupid. You have to ask yourself, why did it take so long? But I think there was, I can give you another interesting example. When Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, and he called a bunch of industrialists together. And each industrialist was asked to express his point of view. And one of the problems is that industrialists don't like necessarily disagreeing with each other. So each one uses a form of words which puts across his point. But in this particular case, you had Mukesh present, and you had a lot of these public sector guys, BHEL fellows and so on, and they're all sort of saying that, look, we should not allow any Chinese import of a power plant, because we have the technology, BHEL does all the work itself. And you know, and quite a lot of the other industry that fed into BHEL, they also took the same view. Then when the time came for Mukesh to speak, he said, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, I don't agree with what they're saying. Because he said, you know, the thing is, BHEL does a wonderful job when it's competing for plants abroad. But their delivery schedule for orders in India is lousy. And he said, look, I'm setting up in those days, whatever, 20, 30,000 crores. That sounds like a ridiculously small number today, but in those days it was a lot, plant. And I mean, I can't be placing orders for the power component if it's going to get delayed 6 months. And that's what happens. So that's the reason I get these things from outside, is that it gets delivered on time. So, I mean, he made it plain that it's not very simple. Just do everything at home. We didn't have the slogan Atmanirbhar in those days, but you know, it was like self-reliance, and these chaps were saying self-reliance and so on, you know.
Yeah. I was planning to come to this part of the story later, but since you brought it up, maybe I can segue into that. You have this book, which you've been talking about earlier also, called Backstage, the story behind India's high growth story. So, how difficult or how much of a struggle was it to actually push through the reforms from the late.
That's, you know, that's very genuine and tough question. And I'm suspicious of my answer because my answer will be sort of, you know, self-propagating. And after all, I've written my answer in my book. And I like to think maybe I haven't got it quite right. So, I mean, I'm rethinking my own approach to these things.
Yeah.
So with that
Caveat.
qualification, let me say, you know, it wasn't easy, but one very important reason why we could do this is that the problems of the lack of attention to reforms earlier had surfaced in a big way. You know, I don't know if it's realized, but it was known in the last year of Rajiv Gandhi's prime ministership that we have a problem. But the balance of payments and what have you. And that, you know, some really serious rethinking will be needed. In those days, the finance ministry's response to any balance of payments problem was to cut unnecessary imports. Now, what exactly is unnecessary? Some babu would decide. I remember going into one of these committees where, they used to have this absolutely ludicrous thing called the essentiality criterion and the indigenous angle criterion. So if somebody applied for something, saying, I need this in order to produce something, the first question was, does he really need it? I mean, is it really essential?
Otherwise, why would he ask for it?
Now, yeah. No, the answer I'll tell you. Because if you're, say, instrumentation, okay, if you don't feel that the accuracy of the instrumentation is that important, then maybe he doesn't need what he's asking for. He needs something a lower grade. Maybe imported, may not be imported, but they would even check that, okay? Then the essential angle, the indigenous angle, can you get it indigenously? Now, you know, I learned very early that this was a laughable system. And I'm saying all this because all your PLI schemes will be subject to exactly the same problem. Because the PLI schemes are normally approved on a best effort basis, that this is the benefit, but by this year you must increase domestic availability to so much. Now the point is that domestic availability may be downgrading the quality by an extreme extent. And if you're not allowing the import, it doesn't matter. I mean, today, for example, in the case of solar cells, we are banning the import of solar cells. You can only get solar cells from a group of people who have an advanced, whatever that's called, some import permission. And there are 6 different people. So you have to get your solar cell from them. And they've been told that they must increase the domestic content, etc. Now I ask myself, what happens if one of them says, you know, I couldn't do this because it's a supply chain problem, I couldn't get this thing. Somebody has to then make an administrative decision. Is it okay? Isn't it okay? I mean, it will just be a mess. And it was a mess. You know, Narayan Murthy once told me this story, which I've got in backstage. You know, they had a scheme that if you promise an export performance 3 times the value of the import, you could import the thing duty-free. So wonderful. So they said, we want something, Hewlett-Packard machine. And it costs X, and we will produce 3X of exports. Now, it took 6 months for the license to be cleared. During that period, Hewlett-Packard had hugely improved that particular machine to a much better standard, and it was cheaper. But of course, it had a different number. But the license these guys had was for the earlier number. So Narayan Murthy said, look, it's the same company, it's a better product, the product improvement. I went to the customs guy. Customs guy said, well, I can't allow you because you have a license for this number, and this is a different number. So Narayan Murthy said, what do we do? He said, well, you have to get another license. Take another 6 months to go back and get the thing.
By the time
he was told quite clearly that if you pay a little bit of bribe, then the fellow will let you. But Narayan Murthy, being Narayan Murthy, wanted to get it right and all the rest of it and so on. And so he took this additional time, and he told me that this is absurd. I mean, these guys had no idea how fast things change. And there's another wonderful story that, you know, I think Maruti had this problem. because at a certain time, under the phased manufacturing program, it used to be called, Maruti was supposed to indigenize the engine block. You know, earlier they were importing it, indigenized. Okay? So they said, okay, we will indigenize it and we will make it, but we want an HMT machine, I mean a Japanese machine to do the machining. So then they had to, the import guys, essentiality criterion, indigenous angle. HMT promptly said they don't need to import it, we have the machining equipment, get it from us. Maruti said their machining equipment is not good enough to achieve the standards we want. And then they said, look, they're using their machining equipment for scooters, but I'm doing it for a car. And the engine block of a scooter is very different from the engine block of a car. Now, you know, since Mrs. Gandhi in those days was very interested in Maruti, normally if you had an HMT guy saying that, it would have been thrown out and just take whatever they've got. But since this was Mrs. Gandhi's project, I mean, named after Sanjay, it had a blessing of the Prime Minister. Nayanta Tiwari, the Minister of Industry himself, said, "Bhai, I must decide." So what happened? There was a meeting in which I think, if those of you who know Kado Bhargav can verify it, he's the, whatever, now the still the chairman of Maruti. He brought an engine block of a two-wheeler and an engine block of Maruti and put it in front of the minister. So Tiwari ji looking at a little small engine block, bigger engine block, and he explained to him that this is what HMT can do. They cannot do this. And I mean, of course, I suspect Tiwari ji would have done it anyway because the Prime Minister was involved, right? But he got his permission. What I mean is that the system loves the idea that whoever is the Joint Secretary in charge of something is the world's leading expert on that subject.
Hold it a little bit closer to you, they can't hear you.
Oh, I think, you know, so as a result, what you get is decision making by people who are simply not, and I'm not saying this as a criticism, because look, I've been looking at this for a long time. Most of the guys are there for 2-3 years. And you know, in a 2-3 year period, you don't even get the fullest examples. But I remember telling the Chief Commissioner of Imports and Exports that, look, you're presiding over meetings and the decision is, should we allow import or shouldn't we allow import? Half the time, these guys are making a decision about a product when they don't know whether it's a solid, a liquid or a gas. Some scientific damn name, you know. I want chap says, generally the finance ministry would say no, because it takes foreign exchange and they must conserve for it. Now this elementary thing about foreign exchange was again a stupid decision, because if you were to free the exchange rate, you don't have to allocate this way.
Yeah.
If the exchange rate depreciates, the guy won't take it.
Yeah.
But they would not allow that. And this is, and by the way, politically, even today, well, not today, but let's say when Vajpayee ji came, there was the Asian crisis,
yes.
1997. Then the rupee wobbled. Our view was that let the rupee wobble, it'll settle down. The limited point I'm making is, I feel industry does not talk enough, and the system doesn't encourage it to talk either. And unless the industry gets actively involved, you can't expect the government. The guys deciding don't even know these things. I mean, you know, really. But things are getting done in their name without them realizing it. That's a real problem.
No, thank you. I have a couple of other questions and then maybe we can open it for the audience. Just staying on this book, when we were talking earlier, you were mentioning how the economic growth story of India is not simply about the growth, but several other institutional reforms that happen, including the Aadhaar and the UPI and the mobile. So, what facilitated, where did these ideas come from, and what kind of struggles did the government have to go through to make sure that all these other reforms which are aligned and which facilitate economic reforms actually happen?
I think there's no substitute but a constant debate and constant involvement of newer and younger minds, and particularly when technology is changing very fast. I mean, you know, I say this often when I give lectures that one of the most important consequences of technology changing rapidly is that what we call experience doesn't matter. Because the experienced guys are all locked into the old technology. And if I were recruiting somebody, I would not be looking for a person who has worked for 30 years in the same company. I would be looking for some young guy who went here and went there and learned a thing or two. But it's very difficult to somehow internalize all that in the system. And I feel that, I mean, you know, elsewhere, one of the ways you do that is having much higher educated civil service. And here there is a problem in the sense that one view could be that you have a general exam and then you stream these guys off, and you're going to be specializing in industry, you're going to be specializing in something else. It's not very easy to do because many of them regard the choice of the specialization in future. So everybody wants to be finance secretary or maybe industry secretary. Because of that, it's not easy to grade these people off. The other is, I think we need to have far more lateral bringing in. And look, you mentioned Aadhaar. Absolutely the central thing that made Aadhaar successful is that we brought in Nandan Nilekani. Okay? I've discussed this in
The book.
the book. And I'm quite clear that Aadhaar succeeded only because of Nandan. Let's be very clear about it. So, how did it happen? Well, Manmohan Singh said to me that, look, we want to fit Nandan into government somehow. And I mean, at one stage, there was some talk that he might become a minister or whatever. But for whatever reason, Manmohan wanted him in. So why don't we put him in the planning commission? As a member, have the rank of Minister of State. I said it'd be fantastic. And he said, you talk to him. So I fixed a meeting with Nandan. And Nandan said to me, look, I'm not really interested in just being another member looking after 3 ministries and reading what they propose and so on. I'm not interested. But you have this project, the Aadhaar project, which is in the Planning Commission. If you give me exclusive charge of the project, I'm interested. Because I think that the way they're conceiving it is wrong. And then he explained to me, and I thought he was right. So I went straight back to Dr. Singh and said, look, this is the condition. I agree with it. Please bring him in. And I said, don't make him Minister of State. Give him cabinet rank. Rank doesn't mean anything, but rank means a lot in the sense that in the government, if you have cabinet rank, you can technically call a very senior secretary to your meeting. If you don't have a cabinet rank, he'll invariably send his additional secretary. So, you know, these little things matter. Anyway, Dr. Singh agreed, Nandan agreed, came on board. But I was really surprised that the civil service didn't want the idea that the guy can reshape the whole thing. So they would keep raising objections of various kinds and so on. And you know, if he was running the project, he had to have his own budget, because after all, he was managing it differently, whereas the previous fellows wanted to use the office of the census commissioner. He wanted to do it differently, hiring people who would open up their own windows, etc., for which you needed a budget. And the budgets have to go through the financial advisor. And that meant, since he was located in the Planning Commission, that meant the financial advisor of the Planning Commission. And these guys take a long time, etc., etc. So Nandan was getting quite fed up with the procedure. So I asked some people, how do we get around that? So they said, sir, the only way is that since he's an independent office in the Planning Commission, you give him his own financial advisor. But you have to get the Ministry of Finance to agree that he must have his own financial advisor. Your own financial advisor will totally disagree, because that's one more apple going out of his his empire, right? So we managed to get the finance ministry. I said, look, you define the quality. He was a audit and account service officer, but an officer chosen by Nandan, whom Nandan believed was sensible and serious and so on. That took care of those problems. So, inducting someone from outside and putting him in the system doesn't solve the problem. Because I think you have to recognize that the system can fight back in a million ways. So unless if Nandan was doing it over a 5-year period, he would have worked it out himself. But he doesn't have the patience to do that. So you really have to do something else. And the way it worked was brilliant. I mean, he managed to achieve the target that was set. He managed to bring in the Reserve Bank of India into the process of accepting Aadhaar as a KYC. So the opening up of bank accounts became a lot easier. At that time, the BJP was totally opposed to this project for whatever reason, I don't know why. And so when Nandan stood for election in 2000,
9, I think.
Yeah, 2014.
14.
When the UPA's last election, he stood for election and lost in Bangalore. Big shock to me, by the way. But I thought Bangalore, Congress was forward Nandan Nilekani. Surely Bangalore would want to elect him, but they didn't. The BJP guy won with a very substantial majority. And Nandan was aware that the BJP had, as a party, had objections to this project. So he sought a meeting with Prime Minister Modi. Now, Prime Minister Modi gave him time. Now, this is also interesting. Because, what would he have been told? Aisa wo Nandan Nilekani, kaun hai? Well, Congress candidate. Now, if he had just said that, you would say, what the hell, why do I have to meet this fellow? But they must have told him he's a techie, an important fellow, and so on and so on. So Mr. Modi met him. He gave him 15 minutes scheduled, but he was there for 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes, he persuaded Modi that, look, this is a good project. And Modi promptly told the BJP, don't kill it. So, these little things at critical moments make a difference. And of course, Aadhaar expanded, it's been used quite widely. It's a pity that in our system, each party wants to project that the previous party was a disaster and we are the only ones who have done. But we move so slowly that whatever damn good you do, it's only worthwhile if the next lot do the same thing and carry it forward. And a lot of the reforms that have taken place were carried forward. I give a lot of credit to Montek Singh for being a very non-impassioned, reasonable, persuasive sort of person, so that the governments that came after him continued the reforms, including Vajpayee's government. And Vajpayee's government actually carried on doing. They didn't go around saying, this is all rubbish, we're going to reverse all this, So I think unless you are so certain that you're going to be around for a long time, you have to recognize that you build on whatever is being created. And I think you strengthen India by saying, they did a good job for their time, but we did even better. That's a good line to take. But to take a line that they didn't know what they were doing, we're the only ones, that is not a good line to take. So whenever there's a change of government, I hope we retain that. And some things are clearly working and others are not. Yeah. And what we need in industry is some feedback. This is very well intentioned, lekin ye chal nahi raha. I think that's lacking. I feel sorry in a way for our politicians. They're not in a position to be able to go to the Prime Minister and say, Kezab, you wanted this and that to happen, and I've had a chat with the industry, and they tell me that unless A and B is taken care of, it won't happen. You need that, and I think this is, I'm telling all you guys because you're in a position where you must work out how you give this feedback. Sometimes it works. For example, even for this current government, at one time in an excess of zeal on Atmanirbharta, it was decided that no more laptops to be imported 2 years ago. And it's interesting, within 2 days, that decision was reversed. So, very often I find people saying that the system is not able to stop something because everyone thinks it came from the PM. But here's a case where they did. So I don't know who went there and did what, but whatever it is,
It worked.
at least it's a proof that the government is able and sometimes willing to make these changes. But I feel that not enough of this feedback is getting organized.
Yeah. So maybe just one more and then we'll open it up. You've been talking about Dr. Manmohan Singh and his reforms and the way in which he facilitated various kinds of policies and reforms. Since this program is called Navigating the World, a Leadership Journey, how would you characterize Dr. Singh's leadership style?
No, let's put it this way. There are many different leadership styles and each one works in certain circumstances. His own leader, you have to remember that you have to judge him very differently from a normal politician. Because when he was finance minister, he had a clear deal with Narasimha Rao that, look, I'm going to have to do a lot of things which you will find politically very difficult. And Narasimha Rao gave him very clear understanding that I know that, and I do believe Narasimha Rao knew that. You do what you have to do, leave the politics to me. And I think he stood by. Manmohan knew he had Narasimha Rao's backing throughout. And as long as he had that, it was more a technical job. Later on, when he became Prime Minister, it was very different. Because, under Mr. Narasimha Rao had, I forget the total number, about 232 members of parliament with him, the Congress. Still not a full majority, but you just had to get a few people. By the time the UPA happened, Mrs. Gandhi, as the head of the UPA, she had only about 182. And if you added all the other parties, it came to about 232. Only if you added the left did they have a majority. So it was you have to keep a lot of balls in the air, which is very different from a situation where if you have a majority. If you have a majority, you have much greater flexibility. So I think his leadership style was very much persuasive, but he wasn't always able to achieve the result. I tell you one very interesting case where I've been constantly saying that the railways is not doing a good job because they come to the Planning Commission and say, we need this plan physically, and we say, yeah, absolutely right. Then they say, this is the amount of resources we are going to generate. You give us the extra amount. We, after a bit of bargaining, we say, okay. So we make that amount available. Then they don't generate the internal resources and they keep coming back saying, we want more money. How can I give you more money without cutting something else? So frankly, you should, it's a corporate plan, you should damn well make sure that you generate the resources you need to generate. And what was his name? Dinesh Trivedi, I think.
Yes, a TMC from the Trinamool Congress.
Yes. Mamta Ji, the railway ministry was her gift.
Yeah.
She was railway minister also, but when she went back as CM, she retained thing and she put him, Dinesh there. And I persuaded Dinesh that, look, you're ignoring investment in safety, and this is simply leading to more and more accidents. Yeah, I agree with you. So in the meeting with Pranab Babu and with Finance Prime Minister, and I was also there, and he was saying, look, I need more money. I said, I agree he needs more money, but that's because he's not generating what he should be generating. You should let him raise the railway fares, because he hasn't raised railway fares for a hell of a long time. And he said, sir, I think he is right, and I think we should do it. And I will persuade my leader. And Pranab Babu told him, look, it's wonderful if you're going to do that, but I don't think you're going to succeed. And that's exactly what happened. But to his credit, he insisted on raising them, and then we got a letter saying he's to be relieved of his position. Yeah. So he was kicked out. And some other guy came who was following the leader's instruction. So here you had a prime minister with an ally, but the allies viewed themselves as having substantial kind of freedom in making critical decisions. So it's a different kind of style, and his was a very persuasive style. But you know, some things are, to my mind, absolutely essential, and that is that whatever the choice, there should be a careful assessment of what are the alternatives. I mean, you know, when I was in planning in the PM office, one of my bosses used to have a little plaque on his table, and the plaque said, "This is a crisis. We must do something. This is something. Therefore, let us do it." Now, that is the worst way of thinking. I mean, we need to work out what is it that we need to do and what is it that will work. And I think if there's enough thinking on that, it doesn't matter what your leadership style is. I mean, if you can overrule opposition, that's fine. But you've got to have a thorough discussion of what the options are. And the problem is, in this day and age with AI and technology change coming, I mean, this is going to be, you know, you can see that in what's going on in the Gulf War and the Ukraine War and all that sort of stuff. I mean, all standard technologies and systems are not working. Here you've got these Gulf states. They've all received Patriot missiles worth $1 million to $3 million. They can knock out a drone for sure, but the drone costs $15,000 and they have 10,000 of them. And these guys have 600 Patriot missiles. So what is the validity of a strategy where you're going to launch off a Patriot missile to knock down a drone, and more drones will come? You know, I'm sure that I'm sure our military must be worrying about this aspect, and they need to worry about it, you know.
We'll open it up for comments, feedback from the audience. Yeah, I see Vivek and then Prem, and after that Naufal. Yeah, Vivek, go ahead. Maybe you can just briefly also, just for Dr. Montek, if you can introduce yourself. No, you can sit. You can introduce yourselves. Which company, your name?
So I'm Vivek. I'm from Forbes Marshall.
From?
Forbes Marshall.
Ah, Forbes Marshall, okay.
So I have a question in two parts. What do you think would have done differently?
Can I request you to stand up?
Okay,
that
we can't see.
contradicts what he said, because it helps me to
See you better.
Since I use a hearing aid,
Okay.
lip reading is a very important part of understanding.
So in retrospect, what do you think you would do one thing differently today during your tenure at the PM's office? And what's your advice to the current government from the economic standpoint, what India should be doing, at least to get to a middle income country in the next 1.5 decades, let's say?
In what period?
15 years. That's also very ambitious. We can say 2 decades.
Look, I think the bottom line is that, you know, I give this lecture very often, and maybe I did it in Nayanta also, that, you know, when you talk about policies, policies consist of, one is slogans. They're very important. I mean, don't underestimate. And we are very good at that, you know, self-reliance, you know, inclusive growth, sabka saath, sabka vikas. I mean, you name it, we've got a slogan. The next thing after a slogan is target. And having accepted the slogan, what exactly is your target? Now, today, say Viksit Bharat, we have a target, but the target is for 2047. Now, the 2047 target means that an annual average growth rate of 8%. This also government has said. Now, if you ask yourself, if the Prime Minister were to ask, are we on target? What would you say? You would say that in the last 5 or 6 years, the average is only about 6.5. So we are not on target. But somebody could say 6.5, 8, kya farak hai, ho jayega. But actually that's not a correct description. The correct description is that if you're going to reach a developed country status over 25, whatever it is, years, during this period the economy will slow down. Because as you get higher up, it'll slow down. Therefore, to reach 8% average, you should be growing 9% now and plan to slow down to 7. Compared to that, we are nowhere near target. This is the first proposition. I don't know whether anyone is telling the PM this or telling the finance minister or anybody. Now, in my view, industry should be raising this issue in a nice kind of way, saying that, look, it's not your fault, this is just the numbers. But when you set a target, please don't think you're there. You need to have, either you do 9% or forget about, or postpone Viksit Bharat to 2057. I mean, no big disaster, but let's be clear. That's the first point. The second is having got the target. How do you get there? On that again, at the slogan level, we are completely on board, because the slogan is reform, transform, perform. Everybody agrees with that. I mean, yes, we need. But what is reform? Now, is PLI a reform, or is it a backward slide into the old-fashioned protectionism? That's the question you have to ask. And these are complex questions. And for example, let me say, in the energy area, for example, I think there's no doubt whatsoever. And by the way, when I say there's no doubt, that's not totally clear, in the sense that, do we want to exit from coal or no? Now, if you ask the coal minister, he would say, no, what is this? It's our own resource. But so is our sunlight, so is our wind. All said and done, this decision must be taken. And to my mind, it's not enough to say we must be net zero by 2070. Because by definition, net zero by 2070 means no coal. But does it mean only by 2070? I mean, should we be building coal plants for the next 5 years, which will remain for 40 years, or should we start phasing down now? So the target is, when will we stop building new coal plants? We can have a discussion on that. I mean, your Johnny-come-lately types will say 2030 band kar do. Someone will say 2032. Jo bhi hai, there should be a target. Okay. Now, when you say that, when you say RE, we must have RE, very good. Now, problem with RE is that there is a complete misrepresentation of the competitiveness of RE. You will hear any number of people saying that RE is now competitive with a coal plant. This is not true. It is true if you're not bothered about a steady supply. If you want a steady supply, you have to supplement the RE with batteries. And if you want batteries for 6 hours, that's going to be quite expensive. It is more expensive than new coal. Now, the answer is that technology is moving so rapidly that in coal you can assume there will be no technological development, because the West is no longer interested in coal. Here there will be, because they're interested in it too. So it may be expensive now, but it will become cheaper. So we should get into learn how to run an RE system and all that kind of stuff. If you're going to run an RE system, then are you just going to equate supply and demand through batteries, or are you going to vary prices, intraday variation, so that you can manage some of the demand? And the short answer is yes. If that is so, what should the regulatory system be? You need a working paper on this. Somebody should say, what is Indonesia doing? What are the Chinese doing? What are the Europeans doing? We are not working this out at all, in my view. Similarly, on wind, Tamil Nadu has any number of windmills, all of which are suboptimal height, they're too low, old design. If you can have much higher towers, bigger propeller blades and so on, you can generate a lot more electricity. But to do that, you need an entire reconstruction of these things. There's financial implication, land clearance, God only knows what. Now, this is not something for the central government to do, but this is something for Mr. Stalin as chief minister. He should have a policy paper now. It is my plan. And give him credit. He has said, I mean, I'm on some advisory committee or whatever, the governing council on climate change. He has said that, look, India is going to net zero by 2070. That's very good. But I think that we are more advanced than India, which is true. So we must get there by 2060, which is also true. Very good. So he must have targets consistent with 2060. I don't think they've spelled that out yet. But one of the important things in the target is these windmills, because these are natural resources and they're stuck with a highly suboptimal system. And there are safety issues also, because you know, if you have a tall windmill, will it meet safety requirement? Whatever it is, we need some expertise going into it, not just talking about it and forgetting about it. So I think one can make a list of these things. I mean, one of the most obvious things we need to think about, too much talk at the moment about green hydrogen for buses. It's a good idea. I mean, one day it'll happen. But you know, we have limited resources. So how do we use these resources in the short period? We should be using it to the things that will save the most carbon dioxide. And that is not on the green hydrogen front. I mean, Mukesh Bhai can do the green hydrogen for his own refinery, that's fine. But to do green hydrogen buses, it frankly is just absurd. But I mean, the Petroleum Corporation is, I don't mind for a little bit of, you know, we donate 2 buses, theek hai, chalo. I mean, India is a big enough country that everybody should experiment a little bit. But there should be a very clear signal what we are going to do. A related point, the most important thing is not electrification. Electrification is useful because getting away from ICE vehicles is very important. Otherwise, they pollute the hell out of the atmosphere, okay? Now, the real solution is not making all our cars electric, because it won't affect congestion one bit. So you won't be polluting the air, but you will be sitting for 2.5 hours going from here to my house. For that, you need to move to public transport. For that, you need much, much better public transport. Air-conditioned buses, comfortable buses. You need actually what the PM has called lifestyle, whatever. Now, you know, it's a sad thing that at least for Punjabis, the definition of prosperity is that you buy a car. And the definition of additional prosperity is you buy 2 cars. Now, frankly, and quite honestly, I think your automotive guys are delighted by that. Now, I will be persuaded that industry has done its job if industry were to tell the government, do not think that you will get an automotive explosion of the kind that the Americans had. That is, even for them it was wrong, but certainly for us it's not workable. But the implication of that is that the number of vehicles is not going to expand as much as they talk. On the other hand, EV buses, but forget EV, why not ICE buses, which are air conditioned, that will make a huge difference. And frankly, I don't see why we can't have a complete modernization of the bus system so that on my mobile, if I indicate which bus stop and which bus I want to go to, it should tell me when the next bus is coming. It's no big deal, but it will make a huge difference. People know, okay, better leave now, and if not, then I'll catch the next bus. They still keep chatting with their family. But you know, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
integrating the metro with the buses is the next obvious thing, which we have not done.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Can we go to Prem?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I am Prem from Coax Marshall. I have a question on budget. So budget have 2 parts basically, revenue and capex. So first, clear my understanding is that ratio is around 80-20 or even less for capex, because most of the state budgets are also less than 20% on capex. And with so many now schemes coming on, that budget is reducing even to an extent of 10-12%. So how do you see that and linking with 8-10% growth? Because if we spend less on capex, how actually then we achieve the 8-10% growth what we are talking of? And do you see any possibility of increasing the capex proportion going ahead, or you see that?
Well, you know what, you need capex, but you don't necessarily need it from the budget, no? Of course you need capex, you need private investment. If you had a policy, if you try to work out why is private investment so dead, rather than just keep talking about capex in the budget, And frankly, I mean, even in infrastructure development, if you do it well, you can get a lot of private money into that. For some reason, we're not doing it. I mean, at one stage, we were going to do a lot more of PPP in railways. We've backed off that. Even modernizing the stations, they can all be done by the private sector. I mean, after all, look, it was during UPA times that the Mumbai and Delhi airports got done. And they were an eye-opener that these two private sector guys produced really first-class airports. At least they look first class, they still look pretty good. So I think if you ask yourself, I'll tell you my little story on the railways. I was very determined that, we should privatize a large part of the railways. But, we try and do it over time. 5 committees have made this recommendation, including 2 in the present government and 3 in the previous government. And neither government has done that. So this is a critical issue. And I can understand why it's not being done. Because you have 1 lakh employees, public sector employees. But 1 lakh employees is one thing, but there are a lot more people in the country than 1 lakh. Is there a public debate on whether this is the way to do it or not? And even these employees, they understand that what is in the public interest if you make it very clear to them. And for example, in the case of PPP in stations, everywhere in the world, stations have become occasions for earning more revenue, etc. And when I went to China, I was really struck by the quality of the stations in Beijing. So in fact, I said, let us enter an MOU between the railways and the Ministry of Railways in Beijing, and you visit there and they'll visit here. And I thought that this would make our fellows realize what is happening. And I'm sure it did, because they had fantastic railway systems. Then I got a letter saying, I'm sorry, we must cancel this MOU now. So I said, why? He said, because we have shut down the Ministry of Railways and we have converted the railways into a corporation. So if you want to do anything with the railways, you let your railways deal with. But since those railways were no longer government, our railways didn't want to have anything to do with them. So elsewhere in the world, and people always go and talk about China, this is something we could have done too, but we're not doing it.
Yeah, thank you. We'll go to Nauful. Can we pass the mic there, please? No.
Good evening. My name is Nauful from Tata Electronics, from Semiconductor Packaging Division. So I have one specific question on the semiconductor side.
Can you hold it close a bit?
Yeah. With increasing geopolitical shift in the semiconductor supply chain, how can India position itself as a reliable alternate manufacturing hub, and also can play a role in net zero by helping to provide a very energy efficiency for electronics?
No, sorry, what was the point about net zero?
Because instead of producing more energy, there are always ways to do the very energy efficient solutions. So semiconductor power electronics, especially the wide bandgap materials, can play a major role. So my question is the current existing capex subsidy that government is giving to semiconductor alone is enough, or need more policies to be able?
You mean the PLI subsidy for semiconductors? What is the ratio of subsidy to cost?
Well, currently it's about 50% on the capex.
50% of total cost.
Yes.
You want more than that?
No, I think more other policies.
Not only 50% of capex, sir.
Yeah, sure.
It's not more. What I'm saying is that instead of only the capex subsidy, is there any other policies like import, more into the government policies, the import or a manufacturing, fast manufacturing plant, something more into it?
So you're basically, you're really basically in favor of going back to what we were doing in the 1970s. That's what you're saying. I mean, say it if you believe that. That's what it is. Look, East Asia, including the Chinese, they link their subsidies to global competitiveness. I am in favor of giving subsidies that are linked to global competitiveness. giving subsidies that are linked to feeding the domestic demand, I would prefer tariff. I mean, let me not try to be too smart. I would say that if the name of the game is that we really don't think we can be competitive internationally, but there's a lot of domestic demand, okay? So why don't we let us fulfill the domestic demand? I'm in favor of a tariff which you think is an adequate tariff, and you phase it down over 5 years so that you have a clear signal that you have to become competitive. The present tariff may not be high enough. I mean, take solar cells, for example. The tariff is at the moment 40% or 15, whatever, 25 for different one for modules and for cells, but it was raised to 40% or so. In addition, they say that, look, you have to buy the domestic thing. In other words, even though you're giving a tariff, the tariff is not enough. I'm in favor of jacking up the tariff and then saying, but we'll phase it down. The reason I say that is that, you know, when you stop the import of something foreign, you are condemning the domestic user to use the domestic product, whatever it is, okay? Now, what I'm saying is that countries that have succeeded by negotiating capital subsidies so that you are internationally competitive. I give you the subsidy, but you have to be competitive internationally. That has the implication that when technology is changing, the person concerned will be very keen to keep abreast of the modern technology. Now, I don't know, I'm not an engineer, so forgive me if I sound like I'm being foolish. But you know, I'm told that the conversion efficiency of solar radiation into electricity, the Chinese cells is about 24% and ours 23%. But what they tell me is that in the lab, the Chinese are working on systems which will very soon give them 33%. Now, if you ran a system with tariffs which enable you to buy at present level of efficiency, but clearly reduce the tariff over time, the signal to the producer would be, you better watch what's happening, because if those things become available, nobody's going to buy your product. If you don't give that signal, then they're happy. They're not interested in international competitiveness. They just want to grab the domestic market. Now, is that a sensible policy? My view is no. And I recognize that what I'm saying is it will raise the cost to the user today. But you know, if you want to subsidize the user, subsidize the user. Why do you want to subsidize the producer? So I'm not convinced that the way we are handling the Atmanirbhar strategy is the correct way of doing it. And the honest truth is, if it needs a lot of subsidy, then we should just not waste money on other things and subsidize it. But simply saying, we don't have the money for the subsidy, so we'll tell government you must only buy Indian stuff and we'll stick a tariff. I mean, that is not, and not a declining tariff. That is not a solution.
So I think the last question, maybe just these two. Because
Are you persuaded? I don't think you're persuaded.
Yeah, maybe we can.
You should all ask Naushad Forbes whether he agrees with what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Ahluwalia. I am Jivan Dasgupta. I represent the Indian machine tool industry. So my question to you is that probably you are the best judge to answer this is, how efficient was it when we had the 5-year planning period? And now we are not having that kind of a
planning
policy
horizon.
making. So what is the difference between
I wouldn't emphasize that. I mean, look, the planning process was a policy discussion process. It is a complete mistake to think that the planning process laid down what needs to be done. The planning process produced some slogans and it covered up for an internal governmental process. Every process was led by the ministry concerned, but the planning commission was in the meeting. We were not laying down. Too many industry, a lot of my friends tell me that most of industry feels that the planning commission was responsible for all the wrong decisions because we are involved in centralized planning. We're not involved in centralized planning. yes, the Planning Commission became it laid out the format, it wrote a plan. But the implementation of the policy to achieve the result was always in the hands of the central ministries. The central ministries invariably preferred a system in which the administrative decision maker decide what needs to be done. Let me give you a simple example. The carbon market. We are 1st of April, we're introducing carbon credit market. I don't think it's well designed at all, because what we've done is, first of all, we have not included the power sector in this carbon market. I mean, power sector is the one that generates most of the CO2, right? Why have we not done that? Because the ministry thinks that they can control it by forcing the discoms to buy X% of renewable energy and keep increasing that percentage. God knows whether that is achieved or not achieved, implemented or not implemented. I think I have serious doubts about that. Chalo, power is out. Then you've got 5 or 6 other ministries, and for each ministry, we're told that we're going to fix a kind of an entitlement to pollute depending on production. What that entitlement is negotiated unit by unit. And the ministry concerned is firmly defending the public sector units so that they are given a relatively loose treatment. Nobody is asking the question that if we are meant to go to net zero by 2070, which is what the PM has set, and he has not changed his mind on that, then do we have a transition from the entitlements we are now allowing down to something consistent with zero? We should have. And secondly, can it be separate for each sector? Should we not be having a system where the cost of saving carbon dioxide is roughly equal across sectors? We don't have that. So now this is a completely bogus, I wouldn't say this in public, but I mean, unless you guys bring it out, I mean, and by the way, I mean, I don't think even the think tanks are bringing it out properly. This is what Rahul Bajaj would get up and say straight away. And he'd do it nicely. He'd say, Prime Minister, I really congratulate you for the net zero by 2070, but your ministries are letting you down. I mean, I think if something like that went, the PM would say, Bhai, kya keh raha hai? I mean, he says, I'm doing the right thing and these fellows are doing the wrong thing. What is the truth? We are not doing any of that.
All right.
I wanted to add one. So,
With
it was part of that.
let him
Yeah.
Now, currently, the role that Niti Aayog is playing is
Who?
the same Niti Aayog.
Niti Aayog.
The role Niti Aayog is playing is similar to what Planning Commission was
No,
doing. Or
well,
it's different?
since they're all my friends, I never comment on Niti Aayog. But no, the answer is no. The reason is very simple. The Planning Commission was forced to prioritize. Niti Aayog doesn't need to prioritize. We had to prioritize because we were told this is the total plan expenditure. So allocate it whichever way you like. Of course, when you say allocated, we were not the final decision maker, negotiate with the Chidambaram, then go to the Prime Minister, he did the final decision. But when the Planning Commission sort of said this is more important than that, they had the ability to shift plan budgets in that direction. That function is no longer with the Niti Aayog. Doesn't matter, I don't know who's performing it. So presumably the prioritization must be taking place there. And the staff is greatly reduced. So I don't know whether the staff has been shifted somewhere else. But this planning process requires very major thinking. And in fact, I was in favor of, I had written a note for the Prime Minister, Dr. Montek Singh, who wanted us to think about how should the Planning Commission change. And we had submitted a note saying that, look, we don't need to pursue everything. I mean, chota projects, ministries. But we had said infrastructure is a big issue, energy is a big issue, and the Planning Commission should concentrate on those. And of course, agriculture. Agriculture, the trouble is, it's not a central government subject. And therefore, whatever we said was of little use because I don't think the states were interested. And the states also took the view, and I agree with them on that. that they said that you don't link your assistance to the way we do whatever we are doing. We are sovereign bodies. It's our agriculture. Jitna paisa dena de do. And one of them said to me nicely that, sir, we respect you greatly. You give us a lecture. If we want to listen, we'll listen. But why are you behaving like the World Bank? I'll give you this money providing you do this and you do this. And I think they're right. And I think this is something which cuts both ways. We should exonerate the central government from misdoings of the state government. But the other implication of that also is that the responsibilities should be more clearly divided. I've said in many occasions that it's wrong to expand the concurrent list. You should have a state list, you should have a central list. And that's the end of the story. Concurrent list should be got rid of. Because the concurrent list is what, I mean, people said education is very important, bring it into the concurrent list. That enabled the central government to put conditionality.
Yeah.
Why not let the education be a state subject? If a state is determined to ruin its education, let it do so. I mean, it will be very clear whose students are valued in the market.
Yeah.
You don't need the central government interfering. And it's not as if the central government's interfering leads to better outcomes. So, you know, these are issues that are not discussed anymore.
Yeah.
Parliament has become completely dysfunctional, and it's a problem. I mean, these are the real strategic choices that we need to make.
Thank you. The last question from Gajendra.
Good evening, I'm Gajendra Nani from Rhodes and Tyres.
From Nalsa.
From Rhodes and Tyres. So the question of industry competitiveness is a really chicken and egg story, because industry operating majority of the major infrastructure from the imported sources, or in our case, majority of the raw material is not available in the country, or the machinery is not available in the country. So, that's a bigger.
What do you mean machinery is not available? You can import it.
Pardon?
You can import the machinery.
Yeah, machinery, but even the raw material. Even the raw material. Majority of raw material is not available in the country.
Import it.
So, and then we lose that competitiveness.
Huh?
Then we lose that competitiveness in the international.
Why? If you're importing it at world prices, the other fellow is getting it at the same price. Why are you losing competitiveness?
If I am importing machinery from China, even I am importing the raw material from the China, and then I need to compete with the China.
Well, I hear this very often, and I'm glad that I'm not full-time working on these issues. So I would like, I would suggest to you all that please tell Naushad that I felt that in these areas, what I've been saying doesn't meet with the spontaneous approval of the audience. But I'm requesting you to arrange that Naushad can talk to them and say that either Mr. Ahluwalia is completely unreasonable or he has a point, even if he doesn't quite know how to solve it. I mean, it's a tough, I mean, look, I just came back from Dehradun. You know, some things, clearly improvement. The road, it's very interesting. The road from here to Dehradun is quite good now, except in bits and pieces. And in another 2-3 years, that will also be okay. I lost my lock for my suitcase. So I wanted to stop and pick up a small lock. They're all Chinese locks. So what has happened to Aligarh, which was the great hub of lock making?
Or Godrej locks.
Oh, well, Godrej are bigger locks. You know, Chut locks, I don't know if they made. But that's a good point. I mean, you know, Jamshed se puchte hain, what has he done on lock? You know, but to my mind, 2 or 3 locks are all Chinese. And, you know, I can understand that the Chinese 10 years ago said we are going to become dominant in chip making. And they put a lot of money in this and that and the other. We didn't do that. But I can't understand why a small little lock can't be produced in India. And I don't even mind, they probably have a duty of 10-20% on it. So you don't have to be totally competitive. But I just don't understand why it's not done. And somebody should explain that to me.
All right. Yeah, we have one last question which is called as a Nayanta question. So you probably have written more books than many of us have read. So, but The question is about what are you currently reading, and what would be one or two great books that you would recommend to the
Well,
participants that they should
that's an
definitely read?
extremely good question. Extremely good. I'll tell you what I'm reading. One is I'm very aware that I'm quite ignorant on AI. I'm reassured by the fact that the vast majority of people I know are also ignorant about AI. And certainly what you read in the newspapers doesn't educate you.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to fill in my knowledge on that. I've asked a few people, including Naushad, that look, this Sarvam LLM that is talked about, how good is it as an LLM? And there must be criteria by which you rank different LLMs. So if you take Grok and Perplexity and ChatGPT and Copilot, then compared to the ranking of these fellows, where does Sarvam rank? None of them knew, but many of them have promised they're going to find out and get back. These are elementary kind of things like that. So one is I'm trying to pick up that. Second, I'm taking a lot of interest in a lot of these debates that keep going on about ancient India. I'm not talking about recent history, Mughal, Yevo and all that. I mean, you know, there are controversies. But there are controversies about ancient India. And one of the big controversies that I'm not able to resolve is, are we accepting the proposition that Indian Homo sapiens actually emigrated from Africa and came to India? So this, huh?
Yes.
You're saying yes? Certify karwa do form. Because you see, there is a very profound sense that nothing came from outside, things went out from here. Okay? So we're not really very happy with the proposition that Sanskrit is an Indo-European language which came in with these odd migrants. Not happy with the proposition that the Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhigarhi and other Indus Valley, Saraswati civilizations did not speak Sanskrit. Not clear whether they did. Trouble is, we don't have any written script of any significant size. So they can't decipher it. If they could decipher it and show that it is a form of ancient Sanskrit, that would be perfect. Otherwise, you have a problem that a lot of our sacred literature is being written in a language that was imported. As you can see, that can be a potential for terrific controversy right now. Interestingly, in Tamil Nadu, these excavations, the Kilari excavation that's going on there, Tamil Nadu guys don't accept the proposition that all the Homo sapiens strains in India came from Africa. They feel that, look, it evolved here. And I must confess that I've been worrying about this, that, you know, we know that there were hominins, pre-Homo sapiens, all over the world. The Europeans have convinced us that it is only in Africa that the hominins became Homo sapiens. If you're a Martian sitting there, see a lot of hominins, would you think that the hominins will become Homo sapiens only in Africa? What's wrong with Tamil Nadu? What's wrong with China? The Chinese are beginning to have second thoughts about this, by the way, because they feel that the Denisovans, who are the hominins of China, that latter-day Homo sapiens in China evolved from them. Now, this is a very major thing, as you can imagine. So I'm trying to collect stuff and read on that, and it's very interesting. I think, the other thing really is this whole issue of what kind of a global order makes sense in the light of the changes that have occurred. Okay, and the changes that have occurred are, first, that the post-Second World War order, which was a balance between the Soviet Union and the US, then at one time the US felt that the Soviet Union has become irrelevant and we are the only fellows that count, the West, and China will join and become democratic and Western and so on. That has clearly not happened. China has succeeded very well. We are also succeeding, but not as well as them. And they're certainly not becoming democratic. So the Americans are beginning to have second thoughts. And as you can see from President Trump's perception of the world, they are quite an unpredictable quantity right now. So I don't know whether industry has financed a think tank to work out scenarios and strategies for the future. What are these strategies? I mean, forget this. We've got the slogans, multipolarity, multi-alignment. What the hell does it mean? I mean, can you be multi-aligned if one of the guys you want to align with says, I won't let you align with someone else? So in that case, how do you make the choice? And do you recognize that you will be forced to make the choice? Okay. Where do we go on things like WTO expansion? Europeans are saying that they need our help for the WTO to survive. I think they are right. We are not prepared to change our mind on anything as far as WTO is concerned. And the Europeans find us quite unhelpful. It's good that they've joined the FTA, and their hope is that we'll soon realize that multi-alignment is not feasible. You have to align with groups that are willing to take you. Frankly, this is something, I mean, American organizations are funding top quality research, not to write op-eds, but to get some of the best brains in the system to think about how will the world evolve and how should we position ourselves. And this requires all political parties to be involved in the process. It's not going to be done by just a Niti Aayog or some new planning commission or something like that. And that's lacking in our thinking.
Any specific books on AIR or ancient history that you're currently reading, just for our book list?
Well, I mean, I can... No, there are lots of books, but I don't feel confident enough to understand the better ones. So I'm just picking here and there and trying to get a sense. And so on.
I think that's a good note to end this Nayanta conversation. I, particularly appreciate how a question on books led to a discussion on ancient history, and from there you got us back to contemporary policy discussions. And that's what this Navigating the World program is also trying to do. Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating journey for us through many decades of India's policy shifts. But I think what was more important was that you told us about how complex the policy making process is and why we need experts, and the process is very knowledge intensive, and we need industry to speak up more to make good policy. So I think that's a very good note to end this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thanks.